Imagine this. You wake up one morning, the sunlight streaming through your window, the hum of the city already alive outside. You reach for your phone, as you always do, and scroll through a cascade of notifications, messages from friends, updates from strangers, a flood of curated lives and fleeting connections. You feel a pang of something, but you're not sure what. You get dressed, step outside, and walk through streets filled with people, yet no one meets your gaze. You're surrounded by humanity, yet you feel utterly alone. This is the paradox of modern life. We are more connected than ever, yet loneliness has become an epidemic. The World Health Organization has declared loneliness a global public health concern, linking it to increased risks of heart disease, stroke, and mental health disorders. But how can this be? How can we, with our smartphones, social media, and instant communication, feel so isolated? How can we live in a world where we can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time, yet still feel like no one truly sees us? The contradiction is jarring. We have built a society that promises connection, yet it delivers something hollow, a facsimile of intimacy that leaves us craving more. We have thousands of friends online, yet we struggle to name one person we could call at 2 a.m. when the weight of the world feels unbearable. We are drowning in information, yet starved for meaning. To understand why modern society breeds loneliness, we must first confront a truth that is both unsettling and liberating. Loneliness is not an accident. It is not a random byproduct of progress or a mere consequence of technological advancement. It is, in many ways, a design feature of the world we've built. A world that prioritizes individualism over community, consumption over connection, and efficiency over empathy. But to see this clearly, we must dig deeper. We must explore the psychological and philosophical roots of loneliness, tracing its origins to the very foundations of human existence. For loneliness is not a modern invention. It is an ancient ache, a shadow that has followed humanity since the dawn of consciousness. Philosophers and thinkers have long grappled with the nature of loneliness. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his exploration of the human condition, spoke of the abyss that stares back at us when we confront our own existence. He understood that loneliness is not merely the absence of others, but the presence of a profound existential void, a recognition of our own finitude, our own separateness. In a world devoid of inherent meaning, we are left to create our own, and this act of creation can be isolating. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, saw loneliness as a symptom of disconnection, not just from others, but from ourselves. He believed that modern society, with its emphasis on rationality and materialism, had severed us from the deeper, more intuitive parts of our psyche. We had become strangers to ourselves, and in doing so, we had lost the ability to form authentic connections with others. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, took this idea even further. He argued that loneliness is an inescapable part of the human condition. In his famous line, "Hell is other people," he captured the paradoxical nature of human relationships. We crave connection, yet we are fundamentally alone in our own subjective experience. We can never fully know or be known by another, and this gap between self and other is a source of perpetual tension. But if loneliness is an inherent part of being human, why does it feel so much more acute in modern society? The answer lies in the unique ways that our world amplifies and exploits this ancient ache. One of the most significant factors is the rise of individualism. In pre-modern societies, identity was deeply tied to community. People derived their sense of self from their roles within the family, the tribe, or the village. But with the advent of modernity, this began to change. The Enlightenment emphasized reason, autonomy, and self-determination, elevating the individual above the collective. While this shift brought many freedoms, it also came at a cost: the erosion of communal bonds. Today, we are taught to see ourselves as self-contained units, responsible for our own success and happiness. We are encouraged to pursue our own goals, to be ourselves, to stand out from the crowd. But this emphasis on individualism can be isolating. When we see ourselves as separate from others, we lose the sense of belonging that comes from being part of something larger than ourselves. Compounding this is the rise of consumer culture. In a capitalist society, our worth is often measured by what we have, rather than who we are. We are bombarded with messages telling us that we need to buy more, achieve more, be more in order to be happy. But this constant striving leaves us perpetually unsatisfied, always chasing the next thing, always feeling like we're not enough. And in this state of perpetual dissatisfaction, it's easy to feel disconnected from others who seem to have it all together. Technology, too, plays a role. While it has the potential to bring us closer, it often does the opposite. Social media, for example, creates the illusion of connection while eroding the conditions necessary for genuine intimacy. We scroll through endless feeds of curated lives, comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reels. We engage in superficial interactions, likes, comments, emojis, that give the appearance of connection but lack the depth and vulnerability of real relationships. And then there is the pace of modern life. We are constantly busy, constantly distracted, constantly moving from one task to the next. In this state of perpetual motion, there is little time for reflection, for stillness, for simply being with others. We have become human doings rather than human beings, and in the process we have lost touch with the things that truly matter. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of modern loneliness is the way it is internalized. We live in a society that pathologizes loneliness, treating it as a personal failing rather than a systemic issue. We are told that if we feel lonely, it's because we're not trying hard enough, not putting ourselves out there, not being likable or attractive or successful enough. This narrative only deepens our sense of isolation, making us feel like there's something wrong with us for feeling this way. In reality, loneliness is not a personal failing. It is a societal one. It is the result of a world that has prioritized profit over people, efficiency over empathy, and individualism over community. It is the result of a culture that has forgotten what it means to truly connect, to see and be seen, to hear and be heard, to love and be loved. But understanding this is only the first step. To truly confront loneliness, we must also examine its consequences, the ways it shapes our personal and societal realities, often in ways we don't even realize. For loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a force, one that silently influences our thoughts, our behaviors, and our relationships. And so we must ask, what are the unseen consequences of loneliness? How does it shape the way we see ourselves, the way we interact with others, the way we navigate the world? And most importantly, how can we begin to break free from its grip? The answers to these questions are not simple, but they are essential. For only by understanding the full scope of the problem can we hope to find a way out. Loneliness is not a passive state. It is not a quiet ache that sits idly in the background of our lives. It is an active force, a silent predator that shapes our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships in ways we often fail to recognize. It infiltrates our minds, distorts our perceptions, and alters the very fabric of our reality. And its consequences are far more profound than we realize. Consider this. Loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a lens through which we see the world. When we are lonely, our brains shift into a state of hypervigilance. We become acutely attuned to social threats, real or imagined. A passing glance, a delayed response, a casual remark, all of these can take on outsized significance, feeding into a narrative of rejection and exclusion. This is not paranoia, it is a survival mechanism. Our brains, wired for connection, interpret loneliness as a threat to our very existence. And in response, they prepare us for battle. But this heightened sensitivity comes at a cost. It narrows our focus, making us less open to new experiences and less capable of forming meaningful connections. We become trapped in a feedback loop. The more lonely we feel, the more we interpret the world as hostile, and the more we withdraw. This withdrawal, in turn, reinforces our loneliness, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that is difficult to break. Neurologically, loneliness has been shown to alter brain function in ways that mirror physical pain. Studies have found that the brain regions activated by social rejection are the same ones activated by physical injury. This is why loneliness hurts, literally. It is not just an emotional experience, it is a physiological one. And over time, this chronic pain can take a toll on our mental and physical health, increasing the risk of depression, anxiety, and even cardiovascular disease. But the consequences of loneliness extend far beyond the individual. They ripple outward, shaping the very structure of our society. Loneliness erodes trust, the foundation of any healthy community. When we feel disconnected, we are less likely to trust others, less likely to cooperate, and less likely to engage in acts of kindness or generosity. This erosion of trust creates a fragmented society, one in which individuals are pitted against each other in a zero-sum game of survival. In such a society, empathy becomes a scarce resource. When we are lonely, we are less able to see the world from another's perspective, less able to feel their pain or share in their joy. This lack of empathy fuels division and conflict, making it harder to bridge the gaps between us. It creates a world in which we are not just alone, but at odds with one another. A world in which connection feels not just difficult, but dangerous. Loneliness also shapes our behavior in subtle but profound ways. It drives us to seek out substitutes for genuine connection, substitutes that often leave us feeling even more empty. We turn to social media, binge watching, or online shopping, hoping to fill the void within us. But these substitutes are like empty calories. They provide a temporary fix, but they do not nourish us. And in the long run, they only deepen our sense of disconnection. Perhaps most insidiously, loneliness distorts our sense of self. When we are lonely, we begin to internalize the narrative of our own unworthiness. We tell ourselves that we are unlovable, that we don't belong, that there is something fundamentally wrong with us. This narrative becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, shaping our actions and interactions in ways that reinforce our isolation. We become trapped in a prison of our own making, unable to see the bars that confine us. And yet, despite all of this, loneliness remains largely invisible. It is a silent epidemic, one that affects millions but is rarely discussed. We live in a society that values productivity over presence, achievement over authenticity, and appearance over reality. In such a society, loneliness is seen as a weakness, a flaw to be hidden rather than a wound to be healed. But the truth is, loneliness is not a flaw. It is a signal that something is deeply wrong, not just within us, but within the world we've created. It is a call to action, a reminder that we are not meant to live this way. So what can we do? How can we break free from the grip of loneliness and reclaim our sense of connection? The answer lies not in superficial solutions, but in a radical reimagining of what it means to live in community. It requires us to confront the systems and structures that perpetuate loneliness and to build new ones that prioritize connection, compassion, and belonging. But before we can do that, we must first understand the full scope of the problem. We must see loneliness for what it truly is, not just a personal struggle, but a societal crisis. And we must recognize that the solutions lie not in individual effort alone, but in collective action. The journey ahead is not an easy one, but it is necessary. For only by confronting the unseen consequences of loneliness can we hope to create a world in which connection is not just possible, but inevitable. To break free from the grip of loneliness, we must first recognize that the solutions lie not in superficial fixes, but in a radical reimagining of how we live, relate, and exist in the world. This is not a call for small adjustments or incremental changes. It is a call for rebellion, a rebellion against the systems, structures, and narratives that perpetuate isolation and disconnection. It is a call to reclaim our humanity, to rediscover the profound truth that we are not meant to live alone. The first step in this rebellion is to challenge the cultural narratives that equate loneliness with personal failure. We must reject the idea that our worth is tied to our productivity, our social status, or our ability to project an image of perfection. Instead, we must embrace vulnerability, the courage to show up as we are, with all our flaws and imperfections. This is not easy. It requires us to confront our deepest fears of rejection and inadequacy. But it is only by being vulnerable that we can create the conditions for genuine connection. Consider the work of Brené Brown, a researcher who has spent decades studying vulnerability and shame. She argues that vulnerability is the birthplace of connection, creativity, and belonging. It is through vulnerability that we bridge the gap between ourselves and others, allowing them to see us as we truly are. But vulnerability is not just about sharing our struggles. It is also about being present for others, listening deeply, and holding space for their pain and joy. It is about creating a culture of empathy and compassion, one in which we no longer have to hide behind masks. The second step is to rebuild our communities. Modern society has eroded the traditional structures of community, the extended family, the neighborhood, the church, leaving us adrift in a sea of individualism. But community is not something that happens by accident. It is something we must actively create. This means carving out spaces where people can come together, not as consumers or competitors, but as human beings. It means fostering environments that prioritize connection over consumption, collaboration over competition, and care over convenience. One powerful example of this is the rise of intentional communities, groups of people who come together to live, work, and support one another in meaningful ways. These communities, whether they take the form of co-housing, cooperatives, or shared living spaces, offer a counter-narrative to the isolation of modern life. They remind us that we are not meant to navigate the challenges of existence alone, that we are stronger together than we are apart. But community is not just about physical proximity. It is also about shared purpose. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that meaning is the antidote to despair. When we have a sense of purpose, we are better able to withstand the hardships of life and find connection with others. This is why it is so important to engage in activities that align with our values and contribute to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's volunteering, joining a cause, or simply helping a neighbor, these acts of service remind us that we are part of a larger whole. The third step is to rethink our relationship with technology. While technology has the potential to connect us, it often does the opposite, creating the illusion of connection while eroding the conditions necessary for genuine intimacy. To break free from this trap, we must become more intentional about how we use technology. This means setting boundaries, turning off notifications, limiting screen time, and creating tech-free zones in our homes. But it also means using technology in ways that enhance rather than replace real-world connections. For example, instead of scrolling through social media, we can use technology to facilitate face-to-face interactions, scheduling video calls with loved ones, joining online communities that align with our interests, or using apps that promote in-person meetups. The key is to use technology as a tool, not a crutch, and to remember that true connection requires presence, attention, and effort. The fourth step is to cultivate a sense of belonging within ourselves. Loneliness often stems from a disconnection not just from others, but from ourselves. We live in a world that encourages us to look outward for validation and fulfillment, but the truth is, the most important relationship we will ever have is the one we have with ourselves. This means learning to be comfortable in our own company, to sit with our thoughts and emotions without distraction or judgment. It means practicing self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend. And it means reconnecting with our inner selves, our values, passions, and desires, so that we can live authentically and align our actions with our true selves. Finally, breaking free from loneliness requires us to challenge the systems and structures that perpetuate it. This means advocating for policies that prioritize mental health, social connection, and community well-being. It means pushing back against the forces of consumerism, individualism, and hyper-competitiveness that drive us apart. And it means creating new narratives, stories that celebrate connection, collaboration, and care as the cornerstones of a thriving society. This rebellion is not easy. It requires courage, effort, and a willingness to confront the status quo. But it is also deeply empowering. It reminds us that we are not passive victims of our circumstances, but active participants in shaping our world. And it offers us a vision of what is possible, a world in which loneliness is no longer the norm, but the exception. The journey ahead is not a solitary one. It is a collective effort, one that requires us to come together, to support one another, and to build a new way of being. But the rewards are immense. For in breaking free from loneliness, we not only reclaim our own humanity, we also contribute to the creation of a world that is more compassionate, connected, and alive. Here is the ultimate truth, the revelation that redefines everything. Loneliness is not a flaw in the human condition. It is a call to evolution. It is not a sign of failure, but a signal that we are out of alignment with our deepest nature. We are not meant to live in isolation, to navigate the complexities of existence alone. We are at our core relational beings, wired for connection, for belonging, for love. And yet modern society has constructed a world that denies this truth, that fragments us into isolated units, that convinces us we are separate when we are, in fact, deeply interconnected. This is the paradox of loneliness. It is both a symptom of disconnection and a catalyst for transformation. It is the ache that reminds us of what we have lost, and the spark that propels us toward what we can become. Loneliness is not the enemy, it is the teacher. It forces us to confront the illusions we have built, the illusions of self-sufficiency, of individualism, of separateness, and to rediscover the profound truth that we are all part of a larger whole. This realization is not just philosophical, it is deeply practical. It changes how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we navigate the world. It invites us to shift from a mindset of scarcity, where connection is something we lack and must compete for, to a mindset of abundance, where connection is something we cultivate and share. It challenges us to move from a culture of consumption to a culture of care, from a society that values achievement to one that values authenticity. But this shift requires more than just individual effort. It requires a collective awakening. It requires us to see loneliness not as a personal struggle, but as a societal crisis, one that demands systemic change. It requires us to reimagine the structures and systems that shape our lives, to create a world that prioritizes connection, compassion, and belonging. Imagine a world where workplaces are designed not just for productivity, but for community, where employees are encouraged to form meaningful relationships, to support one another, to find purpose in their work. Imagine a world where schools teach not just math and science, but empathy and emotional intelligence, where children learn to navigate their inner worlds and connect with others in meaningful ways. Imagine a world where neighborhoods are not just collections of houses, but vibrant communities, where people know their neighbors, share resources, and come together to solve problems. This is not a utopian fantasy. It is a possibility. It is a world we can create, but only if we are willing to confront the forces that divide us and to embrace the truth that unites us. It requires us to see beyond the illusions of separateness, to recognize that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. It requires us to act not just for ourselves, but for the collective good. And yet, even as we work toward this vision, we must also find peace in the present moment. We must learn to hold the tension between what is and what could be, to find beauty and meaning in the midst of imperfection. We must remember that connection is not something we achieve, but something we practice. A daily commitment to showing up, to being present, to loving and being loved. This is the final, most powerful realization, that loneliness is not the end of the story, but the beginning. It is the call to awaken, to remember who we are, and to reclaim our place in the web of life. It is the invitation to step out of the shadows of isolation and into the light of connection, to build a world where no one has to feel alone. So let us answer this call. Let us embrace the truth that we are not meant to live in isolation, that we are stronger together than we are apart. Let us create a world where connection is not just a possibility, but a priority, a world where everyone belongs. And let us begin now. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Inner Psyche so you never miss our next deep dive into the mysteries of the mind and soul.